Policing. So for the next hour, this is the last panel, I'm going to give you a little framework about what we're going to do. If you think about policing as let's just talk about this as a big apple tree. Think of a big apple tree, right? The first 20 minutes of our conversation, if you see all those big, bright, ripe apples, and then there's like a couple of rotten apples your eye is drawn to, right? The first 20 minutes, we're going to talk about how those rotten apples affect people, human beings and families. The second 20 minutes, we're going to talk about how we identify those apples and track them over time. And then the third 20 minutes, we're going to talk about how we have a tree without any rotten apples. So with that introduction, I first want to introduce Star Cooper, who has made it her life mission to discover who murdered her mother, Dorothy Dot Cooper, in Kansas City in 1983, and bring the killers and the police to account. She's joined by Tricia Rojo Bushnell. I think this is your right. Yep, right here. Tricia is the executive director of the Midwest Innocence Project, president of the Innocence Network, and a past president of ACLU of California. Thanks for joining us. So Tricia, we're going to start talking specifically about Kansas City, Kansas, not Kansas City, Missouri. And if people don't know, some of the the depravity there is off the charts. So why don't you just talk a little bit about Kansas City?
Yes, so when we talk about Kansas City, Kansas, both now and in the past, we really sort of have to go back to the case of Lamont McIntyre to understand the atrocities that are happening in Wyandotte County, Kansas City, Kansas. Because if I just listed them here, you actually might not believe me. They are so
why don't you list a couple?
So, well, we're talking about extreme sexual abuse of black women, murders of women who are connected with police that have never been investigated, physical assaults on men, essentially a criminal cartel running our police department where every system of accountability has failed. And the way that this has come to light, it's been over 3 decades that this has been happening, really was in the case of Lamont McIntyre. So Lamont McIntyre was convicted of a crime he didn't commit in 1994 when he was just 17 years old. There was a double homicide that happened in broad daylight, a shooting. Someone ran up and committed this crime. It took the police 19 and a half minutes to close the investigation. They essentially went to an eyewitness, and they gave a photo array, and picked up Lamont, and lots more to go to that. But essentially, he gets convicted, even though he has an alibi. 2 of the witnesses to the crime were family members of one of the decedents, and they go to a hearing, and they tell the prosecutor, that's not the guy. That's not the person who killed my relative. The prosecutor at the time was a woman named Tara Moorhead. She sent one of them home, and she told the other one, you're going to say what I tell you to say, or I'm going to take away your children. And so she does. She testifies against Lamont, immediately recants, and tries to tell everyone to make it right. Fast forward, Lamont's case gets opened by an attorney named Cheryl Pilot out of a law firm, Morgan Pilot, and another organization called Centurion Ministries. And over 10 years of investigation, it became clear what had happened. So Lamont eventually gets exonerated in 2017, and it's through what this investigation revealed, which is essentially this. Lamont was framed because a detective named Detective Roger Golubski, who was on the force for over 30 years, who retired with honors, still draws his pension today, has never had any accountability, raped women, black women, with impunity for those 30 years. And one of the women that he sexually assaulted was Lamont McIntyre's mother. And when that happened, it happened in the police station. Another police officer walked in, saw what was happening, shut the door, and walked out. She reported him, moved, changed her phone number to get away from him. He continued to harass her. And so fast forward in time, when it comes time for him to cover up a murder, because this cartel knows who's committed this murder and they're profiting from it, when it comes time for him to cover up this murder, he makes a photo array of 5 people, 3 of whom are Rosie McIntyre's relatives. He did not care who he got, but he got someone that hurt Rosie. So through this investigation, it takes 10 years because the community understandably doesn't want to talk about what's happening because it's dangerous. But now we've talked to over 100 women who have been sexually assaulted by Detective Golubski and others. He's not the only one. His partner at the time of all this happening then became the chief of police, right? Tara Moorhead, who was the prosecutor who said, I'm going to take away your children, she's now at the U.S. Attorney's Office. And no amount of accountability has happened.
So Roger Golubski is obviously in jail, right?
No.
No.
No. He left there, he went to another police department, and then from there he became the head of security at a hospital where a number of the members of this community go to. He still continues to drive around, people know him and see him. So that is really what launched this into an area where people who were not in the community could see it, right? But it has been openly known in the community for decades that not only Roger Golubski, but the police are dangerous, that they rape black women, that there are dead women who were last seen with police officers and whose murders were never investigated, that there are individuals who have been beaten, killed, right, and who, a drug, essentially, organization that's being run. But we can't get anything done about it. Even the community having said all of that, even us now coming in, even with the support of Rock Nation and Team Rock coming in and saying this is not okay, right? The Department of Justice has not launched a pattern and practice investigation when they could take this over and end it. The FBI has twice tried to start an investigation and then always essentially is like, well, there's nothing we can do because the police just come together and hide everything together, right? The blue line. Their internal affairs, who's going to complain, right? What are you going to complain to? The State Bureau of Investigation said, well, we don't have anything we can do. Take it to the feds. And there's a conviction integrity unit now that exists, so a prosecutor saying we're going to look at these old wrongful convictions that came as a result of Lamont McIntyre's investigation, but those officers are still around.
And this is not a secret, it's open.
It is open. The Kansas City Star, which is our newspaper, writes about this.
So you just Google it?
You could Google it, it would pull right up,
Right.
and nothing has changed.
So how many missing black women, and I know Star, you know this, let's turn to you. Tell us a story about your mom and how Roger Golubski fits into this story.
Well, my mom got killed
Yeah.
my mom got murdered in 1983. I was 1 year old. In 2007, I was like, okay, I want to know what really happened. Nobody never had answers, so I took it up on myself to go to the Kansas City, Kansas Police Department. I want to know what happened. So Roger Golubski at the time was the only detective that I can sit down and talk to.
When you mean that you could, why? Was he the only one in there? Or did they tell you had to?
No, so at the front desk, they told me that he was the only one that I can speak to. Me not knowing anything that happened to my mom, I'm like, okay, I'll talk to anybody right now. So I sat down with Roger Golubski, and he did the whole investigation. He acted like it took like 2 days. And he called me back in the office, and he was like, well, it's really nothing I can do about it. Evidence is missing. And I was like, you know, as a little girl, I always had dreams that a police officer killed my mom. And he was like, well, why would you say something like that? And I was like, well, no one else can get back in your evidence closet to get rid of evidence. Like, this is what I'm thinking. And that's bullshit. Got discouraged, left it alone. I started reading, 3 years ago, I started reading articles about Roger Golubski, and it was like I was reading my mother's murder. And so I reached back out, went back to the Kansas City, Kansas Police Department. I want answers. And nobody don't want to talk about it. They pointed me to another detective. His name was, I forgot his name, but he pointed me to him, and his first thing was, your mother was a streetwalker. What do you want me to do about it?
Let me stop right there for a second. You are searching for answers for your deceased mother.
Yes.
And he says this to you.
Yes.
Tell us how that made you feel.
I mean, it really made me feel bad. It made me feel horrible, like I will never get help from who I'm supposed to have the help from. And I left it alone. I started getting into they was having rallies over in Kansas City, Kansas. I'm like, somebody is gonna hear me. Somebody has to hear me. And so I started going to a few rallies, and I got in contact with other people that were dealing with the same thing I was dealing with. Not knowing it was like some people that I grew up with, some people that I was really close to, not knowing that we were really dealing with the same thing. And
when you say the same thing, define what that same thing is.
With our mothers getting.
So you started meeting other people.
Yes.
Whose mothers
was killed over in Kansas City, Kansas.
Without being solved.
Without being solved.
How many do you know of?
So far, since I've been doing my own investigation, it's over 30 women.
All unsolved.
Unsolved. And then they opened up a cold case unit over there and put a detective over it that has worked with officer. And I've actually talked to her, and I'm like, I have no hope in you. You work with him. You knew exactly what he was doing. Why would they put you over something that you already knew what was going on? So I feel like you're going to come in and cover up everything that he covered up. So it was just like I really had no help. I have no hope for Kansas City, Kansas Police Department.
Where do things stand right now? Have you found anything out at all?
No, within this last month, I'm the person that will keep going over to Kansas City, Kansas Police Department. They're actually tired of me. And this last month, another detective told me, it's really nothing else we can do about it. But then he turned around and told me, oh, it was a strangler back in the day when your mom got killed. We're going to just put this on him.
How many women, how many other cases are you involved with, Tricia?
In the wrongful conviction?
Yeah, that involved the Kansas City.
Well, involving Kansas City, so there's two parts, right? We're obviously looking at the wrongful convictions cases. I work at an innocence organization, but we also believe that we have to prevent wrongful convictions as part of our mission, which means we need to help get changes here, right? So we have the over 30 women that Starr is talking about, which include women where the last person they were seen with was a police officer, they were known sex workers, and nobody ran DNA of rape kits. And now they don't exist anymore, right? Or women where they no defined cause of death. They just don't even look at it. And the other part of that is for all of these women who were sexually assaulted, right? The statute of limitations has run. So they can't sue to get justice. There's no recompense for them. And that's where we have to sort of think outside the box, where if the system as designed isn't providing it, how are we going to change the system, right? One of the things we're asking legislatures is reopen the statute of limitations.
Right.
Give people that opportunity to do that, because until anyone is held to account, nothing is going to change. So, Roger Golubski, everyone likes to talk about him. I'm happy to name him. But he didn't do that in a vacuum, right? You don't get to do that for 30 years and just say everything else is fine. His partner was the chief of police. He then retired, and it goes on and on and on.
Right.